In the movie world, the same film can actually be different depending on where you live. And did you know that in your country you only watched one of the many versions that movie has? If someone asked you what the name of Disney's Polynesian princess is, it's pretty likely you'd say, it's Moana. But that's not the right answer in several European countries. Yes, the demigoddess of the sea doesn't have the same name in Portugal, Spain, France, Germany, Belgium, the Netherlands, Sweden, Croatia, Hungary, and Italy. In those countries, she's known as Vaiana, and the reason is pretty funny. When Disney created this character, the idea was that she would have a name that made references to the salty waters. Moana means ocean in Polynesian, and that made perfect sense. But in Europe, that name was already registered for a brand that doesn't belong to Disney. Because of that, Mickey Studio couldn't use it. So, in many European countries, Moana is known as Vaiana, which is also a Polynesian word. That name means water cave, which also makes sense. But it's funny to know that depending on where you are, the character is called something totally different. Good thing our channel explains everything about the world of your favorite movies. So grab your popcorn, because another Cinewave is starting right now! Do you like that Disney movie about the boy who wanted to be a musician, but ends up in the land of the dead where his relatives try to stop the poor kid from chasing his dream in music? All around the world, people know this movie as Coco, which is the name of Miguel's great-grandmother. But in Brazil, the movie had to be called Viva, A Vida é uma Festa, which translates to Cheers, life is a party. And the reason is pretty hilarious. In Brazil, the word Coco looks way too similar to a word that doesn't go well with a kids movie. It means something super gross and stinky that people usually leave in the toilet and then flush. Yes, it's exactly what you're thinking. And in the case of Miguel Rivera's great-grandmother, her name had to be changed too. Around the rest of the world, she's called Mama Coco, but in Brazil, since that name would never fly in a Disney movie, she became Grandma Lupita. That change was pretty funny, right? Do you like veggies? Better say yes, because they're good for your health. Now, everybody knows that Riley in Inside Out isn't really into broccoli. In the scene when she's a baby and her dad tries to give her broccoli at lunch, Riley refuses and even throws the plate back at her parents. Could there be a problem with this scene? Yes, there is. In Japan, the animators had to change the broccoli to green bell peppers, and the reason is actually pretty cool. Disney found out that in Japan, broccoli is something kids really like. So for Japanese kids, it wouldn't make any sense for someone to reject broccoli. Do you prefer green bell peppers or broccoli? Pick your favorite veggie. Still talking about Inside Out, there's another change that's pretty interesting. In some moments, we get to see what's going on inside Riley's parents' minds. And in one scene, we see Riley's dad dreaming about hockey, which is the sport Riley plays. But since hockey isn't very popular around the world, the animators had to swap it out for another game. Disney changed the dad's thought. If before he was dreaming about hockey, now his memory was about soccer, which is way more popular globally. But it's a little weird because hockey is actually the sport Riley plays. Still, it was a funny change in this Disney movie. And what are you thinking about right now? Drop a hashtag Disney in the comments so we can connect.
I love it!
Zootopia is another movie that had different versions, and this time the animators really had some work to do. If you remember the story well, every important news story happening in the city would show up in a TV news broadcast. There were two anchors, one was a female leopard, but for the other one, Disney decided to create a different kind of animal for each country where the movie was released. In the US and Canada, it was a moose. In China, they changed it to a panda. In Brazil, it was a jaguar. And in Australia and New Zealand, the anchor was a koala. That last one was kind of strange because for Australia, they totally could have picked a kangaroo, don't you think? In Pixar's Up, there are some really interesting changes we're going to explain to you now. In the opening scene when Carl meets Ellie, the two of them build a friendship that turns into love. When they're kids, Ellie shows Carl her adventure book, which is her biggest secret. On the cover of the book, it says exactly what it is. But since the original language of the story is English, the animators had to change the title for every language around the world. In all the versions, it says My Adventure Book, and it makes sense for it to be translated so everyone can read it. It's pretty cool because it shows how much care and attention Disney puts into its studio films. But it looks like translating the text into every language was way too much work, and because of that, the movie Up had the same problem in another scene. Ellie and Carl had the dream of visiting Paradise Falls, a beautiful place in South America. In the movie, they had a glass jar where they saved money to make that dream come true. In the original version, the jar had the name of that place written on a piece of paper. But since lots of people don't speak English, Disney came up with a genius idea for the version shown to the rest of the world. Instead of translating the name Paradise Falls, Mickey Studio decided to just show a drawing of the place the couple dreamed of visiting. Pretty interesting change, right? In Monsters University, the franchise's villain Randall Boggs shows up as one of the students in the scaring program. This character isn't a very popular guy. Maybe that's why he ends up as the villain. And that's exactly why Randall decided to bake some cupcakes where in the original version, he asks people to be his friends. But that wouldn't make sense in other languages, because in English, Randall wrote the phrase "be my pal," putting one letter on each cupcake. There's no way that could work in other countries. To solve this problem, Disney came up with the idea of changing the version for the rest of the world, removing the English phrase and replacing it with a smiley face. You could still tell Randall was trying to be nice to his classmates, but everywhere else the cupcakes were different. Do you think the flavor stayed the same? And you know what's even nicer than baking cupcakes for your friends? Subscribing to the channel and hitting the notification bell. The same language issue happens in the movie Ratatouille, when the main character Remy creates new dishes for the restaurant and some news stories about the place start showing up in the papers. The problem is that Ratatouille takes place in Paris, which is in France, but the original language is English. To fix this problem, they had to change what was written in the newspapers to French. Because of that, there are two different versions of the movie, one where the text and letters are written in English, and another where everything is in the language where the story takes place, French. Did you watch the second Captain America movie? The story starts with Steve Rogers running and exercising. When he meets Falcon, the two start talking about how the world has changed since Cap woke up and fought alongside the Avengers. Steve Rogers has a notebook where he writes down things he needs to check out, since when he fell into the ice, the world was completely different. Steve has no idea what Star Wars or Taylor Swift are. But Disney had an interesting idea. When Steve makes notes in his notebook, each country's version included references to music and TV shows that were popular in that specific culture. Of course, this was Disney making a joke, and for it to be funny, the Easter eggs had to match whoever was watching. There's an interesting moment in Toy Story 2 when Woody is lost and Buzz has to go out with some toys to rescue Andy's favorite friend. When all the toys are feeling sad and almost ready to give up, Buzz comes up with the idea to motivate them. In the original English version, the American flag shows up with the national anthem playing behind the astronaut. But for the rest of the world, that didn't really make sense, so Disney came up with a change. Buzz's motivational speech stayed the same, but instead of the American flag, what's behind the astronaut is an image of planet Earth. The background music also changes. Instead of the US national anthem, the version for the rest of the world has an epic song that feels heroic. This change is really cool and shows how much care Disney puts into its movies. Have you ever noticed that? And now let's talk about a change that happened in a live-action movie. In Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, when the main character goes to the zoo with his uncles and cousins, there's a funny scene. Harry discovers that he can talk to snakes. This happens because his cousin wants a snake that's asleep to move. When Harry is talking to the animal, his line is different in Brazil. In the original language, and in most of the world, Harry asked the snake if it came from Burma, which is a country in Asia. But in the Brazilian version of the movie, Harry asked the snake if it came from Brazil. This happens because the species of snake in the movie looks very similar to an anaconda, which is common in South America. But in reality, that animal is a Burmese python, a totally different species that lives somewhere else. Whether the translation mistake was intentional or not, the production never revealed the truth. But it's pretty interesting to know this change happened in the movie about the world's most famous wizard. As you can see, there are different versions of the same movies around the world. But there's one thing that doesn't change, our channel. And right now we've got 2 more videos lined up for you to choose from to keep having fun. We'll see you in the next video. See you soon.